Hello and welcome to Lima, Peru. In September 2019, I went on a Peruvian adventure, 16 nights on a group tour, which started in Lima. It looks a bit grey from the pictures, and that's because it's really industrialised. We started off with only one night in Lima, so we had a quick chance to explore the city. I particularly like the cathedral. We saw the tomb of the conquistador Francisco Pizarro. But this story is about the first 3 days of our adventure. We were leaving Lima to fly inland to the city of Puerto Maldonado because we were heading for 3 nights in the Amazon rainforest. When we landed at the airport, they picked us up in a minibus and piled our suitcases on top and took us to the centre of Puerto Maldonado. That's where we were storing our suitcases for the next few days, while we actually travelled inland into the jungle. From there we travelled down to the Madre de Dios River because we were starting a journey into the jungle by boat. In fact, there are no real roads in the jungle, so everywhere you travel is on this river. We rode up and down this river a lot, and you don't really get bored of the views because you're in the jungle and it is just wonderful. Eventually we arrived at our accommodation, although the first thing I noticed was the noise. The accommodation was chosen by the tour company. There are different degrees of luxury, so we actually had our own individual wooden huts, but they were really basic. For our first adventure, we went for a walk into the rainforest around the base camp where we were staying. One of the things that grows here is Brazil nuts. So we saw a Brazil nut pod, which with the help of a massive machete was opened up to show what we would think of as Brazil nuts. You break those open and they taste so different when they're fresh from the tree. When we got back to camp, there was a brown agouti, which is a little rodent that actually buries Brazil nuts. It goes dark really early at night, but that didn't matter because we were up really early every morning. We were starting at 4 or 5 a.m. But that's because the jungle comes alive in the morning and you have to be there to see it. Our first expedition started again on the Madre de Dios River. We arrived at the Tambopata National Reserve, where we began with a few kilometres of hiking into the jungle and a lot of wildlife spotting. These are leaf-cutter ants. And then there was a tarantula. Termite nests. Spiders. But it wasn't all creepy crawlies. The next thing we were going to see were the Macaws, who come out early in the morning. These are blue and yellow Macaws. Once we walked a few kilometres into the park, we reached canoes, because that was going to be the next part of our adventure, and I had no idea at this point how amazing this morning was going to be. We started off seeing a few birds, but then we opened up into the fabulous Lake Sandoval. And we were going to sail in our canoes around this lake to do some epic wildlife spotting. We paddled quietly onto the lake, but it was one of those places where you had to keep your eyes peeled for birds, insects, whatever else we were going to see, and there was a rule that you kept your eyes open and pointed out anything you saw. And then we saw a ripple on the water for the first of our big creatures of the day. Lake Sandoval's home to black caimans. This one was so impressive. You can't tell from the photos, but we were really close in our canoe. We had a really brilliant view. Even without the wildlife, Lake Sandoval is so peaceful. It was absolutely beautiful. And then the reflection of the trees on the water, it was really still. This was about 7 o'clock in the morning and it was really hot. But the animals come out in the morning because that's the coolest part of the day. Then we sailed towards the edge of the lake to see what else we could spot in the trees. Locally, they call these stinky birds, and they're huge. They're about the size of a small turkey. And then we got a visit from a really cute capuchin monkey. Lake Sandoval's famous for another big creature, which are giant otters. Now we were keeping our eyes peeled for these, but you almost heard them before you saw them. Even while we were watching the otters, the birds and insects were still all around us. There's just so much to see. We were just quietly sitting in our canoes watching all this happening. We saw them catching fish and then going to the side of the bank to eat it as well. And then it was back onto the lake for more wildlife. This is a toucan. The little butterflies help keep the turtles clean. I actually counted 26 different species of creatures on this trip. If you ever get a chance to go to the jungle of Peru, I would definitely recommend going to Tambopata National Park, but do make sure you go in the morning. As we were leaving at 12 o'clock, people were just arriving, but we'd already noticed a lot of the wildlife had disappeared. After an eventful day, we all went to watch the sunset. But in September, this was only 6 PM, so we still had things to do at night. After dark, we set off for a walk into the jungle, and yep, you've guessed it, the spiders are back. It was amazing how the bird noises disappeared after dark and were replaced by insect noises.
And what spider is that?
Sorry?
What spider is that?
Chicken. Tarantula. Like, it's back to home now.
Next morning, we headed to Monkey Island, which is home to an isolated population of semi-wild monkeys. So because they're partly tame, they rely on humans to feed them, and so we got to take them bananas. For the next part of the morning, we visited a Mashiguenga village to learn a bit of local culture. We saw firelighting, we got our faces painted, watched a bit of local weaving and did some archery. It was set up for the tourists, but it was really good. The chief ate a live grub and offered us one, which we all turned down, but somebody suggested they'd eat it cooked, so we all tried a bit later on. People thought they tasted of Stilton cheese. We learnt a few other things in the jungle, like if you want to see a chicken tarantula, tickle its hole with a stick. They also grow rubber trees, so we watched that being tapped and then smoked into a bowl. For a final adventure, we were up at 4 AM again, but that was perfect for watching the sunrise over the Madre de Dios River. We were up so early because that's when the birds get up. Hundreds and hundreds of parakeets and parrots head down to a spot on the river for what's called a clay lick. And the birds actually cling to the side of the riverbank and chew the clay to get essential minerals and nutrients. I think we saw about 5 different species of parrots and parakeets, but I've read that it can be up to 17. It's one of nature's wonders to see hundreds of birds suddenly descend on this one spot on the river, and they do it like clockwork every day. And then it was time to head back up the river to leave the jungle for the last time. As a final treat, we did see a sloth on the way. Would I recommend adding a trip to the Amazon rainforest to your Peruvian itinerary? Absolutely. It was the adventure of a lifetime. I would choose your accommodation carefully. There are degrees of luxury and you're going to be roughing it, so a little bit of luxury goes a long way. The wildlife that you see is spectacular. We saw so much. Now it was time to head back to Puerto Maldonado for the rest of our 16-day adventure, but that is another story. Thanks for watching, and if you've enjoyed this video, why not subscribe, and why not watch some of my other content as well.